Let me show you something worth noticing. There's a man I knew years ago who made a fortune in the early 2000s, not from being brilliant, not from working harder than everyone else. He made it because he forgot he owned something. He bought shares in a small tech company in 1998, put them in a drawer, literally in a drawer, in an envelope, in a filing cabinet he rarely opened, and then his life got busy. He got married, had kids, changed jobs twice, moved to a different state. 10 years later, he was cleaning out his old office and found the envelope. The company had grown. The shares had split, then split again. What he paid $4,000 for was now worth close to $2 million. His wife asked him how he knew to hold on. He looked at her and said, "I didn't know anything. I just forgot I had it." That story used to bother me. It felt wrong that someone could get rewarded for doing nothing. But the more I watched people with money, the more I realized something. Doing nothing isn't the absence of strategy. Sometimes it is the strategy. Most people think wealth is built through action, through making moves, spotting opportunities, staying aggressive, and in some phases of life, that's true. But there's a different game that plays out over decades, and hardly anyone talks about it. It's the game of not interrupting compound growth, of not getting in your own way. You see it everywhere once you start looking. The investor who checks their portfolio every morning and sells in a panic during a downdrift loses to the one who checks twice a year. The person who keeps switching jobs every 18 months for a pay bump never builds the deep relationships or equity that lead to life-changing opportunities. The entrepreneur who pivots every time something feels hard never sees what happens in year 3 when things finally click. I'm not saying all action is bad. I'm saying we underestimate how much we lose by moving too often. Every trade has a cost. Every pivot has a cost. Every reset starts the clock over. And most people never sit still long enough to see what time can do. Here's what's strange. We live in a world that punishes inaction everywhere else. If you don't respond to an email within a day, people get annoyed. If you don't post on social media, the algorithm forgets you exist. If you're not hustling, grinding, optimizing, someone on the internet will call you lazy. So we internalize that rhythm. We think the same urgency applies to everything, including wealth. We think if we're not doing something, we're falling behind. But wealth doesn't work on the same clock. Wealth is built in long, silent stretches where nothing visible is happening, where you're just holding something while time does the work you can't. And that's uncomfortable, because doing nothing feels passive. It feels like you're not in control. There's no highlight reel for patience. No one gives you credit for the trade you didn't make or the investment you didn't sell. I'll tell you what changed my thinking. A friend of mine bought a duplex in 2011. Not a great area, not a particularly nice building, but the rent covered the mortgage, and she didn't need the cash, so she kept it. Every year, people told her to sell, upgrade, reinvest somewhere better. She didn't. Not because she had some grand vision. She just didn't feel like dealing with it. Fast forward to 2023, and that duplex was worth 4 times what she paid. Not because she renovated it, not because the neighborhood got trendy, just because she held it, just because she didn't sell when everyone said she should. What most people don't realize is that selling feels like progress. It feels like you made a decision. You took action. You were smart. But every time you sell, You're restarting the timeline. You're walking away from whatever compounding was building quietly in the background, and the thing is, most of us don't even realize we're doing it. We think we're being strategic. We think we're optimizing. But what we're really doing is interrupting growth because sitting still makes us anxious. There's a study I came across a few years ago about investors who died. Sounds morbid, I know, but hear me out. The study looked at brokerage accounts where the owner had passed away and the account went into probate, meaning no one could touch it, no trades, no rebalancing, nothing. Those accounts, on average, outperformed active accounts, not by a little, by a lot, because the dead investors couldn't panic, couldn't get bored, couldn't read the news and decide they needed to do something. The market did what it does, and the accounts just sat there and compounded. That's not a morbid lesson. It's a profound one. The single biggest obstacle between most people and wealth isn't lack of knowledge. It's the inability to do nothing when nothing is the right move. But here's where it gets tricky. Doing nothing isn't the same as being lazy. It's not the same as ignoring reality or pretending problems don't exist. The kind of nothing I'm talking about is active. It's intentional. It's a choice you keep making over and over in the face of pressure to do something else. You have to know what you're holding. You have to understand why you bought it in the first place. And then you have to be strong enough to sit there while everyone around you is moving, while the market is screaming at you to react, while your friends are posting about their latest flip or trade or pivot. That's the part no one prepares you for. The loneliness of doing nothing, the quiet discipline of watching other people make moves and choosing not to. It looks boring from the outside. It feels boring from the inside. But boring is what wins over 30 years. I think about the people I know who've built serious wealth, not lottery winner wealth, not inheritance wealth, the kind where someone started with nothing and ended up financially free. And almost all of them have this in common. They bought something good, and then they stopped messing with it. They didn't trade in and out. They didn't chase the next shiny thing. They didn't panic when the news got bad or get greedy when things felt too good. They just held. Year after year, while everyone else was moving, they stayed still. And the gap between them and everyone else just kept widening. You might be thinking, okay, but what about opportunities? What about growth? Aren't I supposed to be ambitious? And yes, there are times to act, times to build, times to take risk. But most people overestimate how often those moments come and underestimate how much damage they do by acting when they shouldn't. There's a concept I've been thinking about a lot lately. It's called doing nothing as a default, meaning your baseline assumption is that you don't make a move unless there's a really, really good reason. Not because you're scared, not because you're indecisive, but because most moves, statistically, make things worse. Think about it. Every time you trade, you pay fees. Every time you sell, you trigger taxes. Every time you switch strategies, you reset your learning curve. The math is working against you from the start. So the question isn't, should I do something? The question is this so obviously better that it's worth the cost of switching? And most of the time, the answer is no. Most of the time, the thing you already have is quietly working in the background. You just can't see it because you're too busy looking for the next thing. I'll give you another example. A guy I used to work with got obsessed with optimization. He was constantly refinancing his mortgage to shave off a quarter point. switching credit cards for better rewards, moving money between savings accounts for an extra 1/10%. And on paper, it made sense. He was being smart, right? But here's what he didn't account for. All that activity took time, took energy, took mental space. And because he was always managing the small stuff, he missed the big opportunities. He never invested seriously because he was too busy optimizing. He never started a side business because he was too focused on tweaking his budget. 10 years later, he's still renting, still working the same job, still optimizing, and the people who just set things up once and forgot about them, they're miles ahead, not because they were smarter, because they weren't constantly interrupting their own progress. Here's the thing that makes this so hard. Our brains aren't wired for this. We're wired to react, to solve problems, to feel like we're in control. Sitting still feels dangerous, feels like we're being complacent, so we do something, anything, just to feel like we're managing the situation. But wealth doesn't care about how you feel. It doesn't reward activity. It rewards patience. And patience doesn't feel like anything. It's just time passing while you hold something that's slowly becoming more valuable. You know what's interesting? The wealthiest people I've ever met are some of the most boring investors. They don't have exotic strategies. They don't trade crypto or flip houses or chase IPOs. They bought index funds in their 20s and never sold. They bought rental properties in decent areas and held them for 30 years. They started businesses and didn't pivot every time something got hard. They understood that the magic isn't in the moves you make. It's in the moves you don't make. It's in the opportunities you pass on. The trades you don't take. The times you feel the urge to do something and you just sit on your hands and wait. And this applies to so much more than money. It applies to careers, to relationships, to how you spend your time. Most people are so busy chasing the next thing that they never give the current thing time to mature. They never stay anywhere long enough to see the compounding effects of just being consistent. I've watched people leave good jobs because they got bored after a year. Leave good relationships because they felt restless. Sell good investments because they read something that made them nervous. And every time they tell themselves they're making a smart decision. They're being proactive, but they're not. They're just reacting. And every reaction has a cost. There's a reason Warren Buffett's favorite holding period is forever. Not because he's afraid to sell, but because he understands that the real gains happen in the years most people don't have the patience to wait for. The years where nothing exciting is happening, where the business is just quietly growing, where the stock is just sitting there, compounding. Most investors never see those years. They sell in year 2 because it feels flat. They miss year 5 when things accelerate. They miss year 10 when the real magic happens. And then they look back and wonder why they never built wealth. The answer is simple. They moved too much. So here's the lens I want to leave you with. It's not a rule. It's not advice. It's just something to consider. What if doing nothing was a skill? What if the ability to sit still, to hold something, to not react to every piece of news or every shift in the market was actually one of the most valuable things you could develop? What if the times you feel most anxious about not doing anything are actually the times when doing nothing is exactly right? What if the people getting ahead aren't the ones making the most moves, but the ones making the fewest? I don't know if that's true for you, but I know it's true for a lot of people who wonder why they're not further along. They're not behind because they made bad decisions. They're behind because they made too many decisions. They kept resetting, kept moving, kept interrupting the quiet growth that only happens when you leave something alone. And the hardest part? You won't know it's working until years later. You won't get any feedback. No one will congratulate you. You'll just be sitting there holding something while everyone else is busy. And it'll feel like you're doing nothing. Because you are. And that's exactly the point. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next.